Hello everyone, I'm Nikobolas, and today is Wednesday, so that means it's time for another MTG Top 10. This is a series where I rank cards based on their historical performance at Magic's highest level of competition. This time around, we're looking at cards that are all three Grixis colors, which are, of course, red, blue, and black. Before we get to this week's list, though, this video has a special sponsor that I'm excited to tell you about. This episode of MTG Top 10 is sponsored by Raid Shadow Legends. I don't always have time to play games on my phone, but when I do, it tends to be Raid Shadow Legends, and lately, I seem to do everything I can to find time to play it. It's a free-to-play, turn-based RPG that is available on Apple, Android, and PC, and it has amazing depth. There is a ton of stuff you can do in the game. You collect tons of awesome champions like those you see here. I just recently got this guy, Drake, and I'm excited to see what he can do. You take those champions and you fight turn-based battles against all kinds of enemies. I have the most fun in the dungeons where you fight crazy bosses like this gigantic spider or the Fire Knight. But there is tons more you can do in this game. Right now they are running the Battle Pass event, which gives you all kinds of prizes for completing daily or weekly missions. In the video description below, you'll find links. If you follow those special links, you'll get 100,000 silver, 1 energy refill, 1 day experience boost, and an awesome champion too, Adjudicator, who you can see here. Once you get these rewards, you'll be able to claim them in your inbox in the game for the next 30 days, so don't waste any time clicking on that link. Alright, so as I said, we'll be looking at Grixis this time around. We get the term Grixis from Alara block, where Grixis is one of the shards of Alara, represented by blue, black, and red. Before we get to this list, here's a quick reminder on how I score cards in these videos. Pro Tour, Players Tour, Mythic Championship, as well as Legacy and Vintage Championship top 8s are worth 2 points, and a Grand Prix or Magic Fest top 8 is worth 1 point. Now, let's get to the list. At number 10, it is Nikobolas, Planeswalker. So, Grixis colors have always been the color of Nikobolas, dating way back to Legends. As a result, get ready to see a whole lot of this dragon, Planeswalker, on this list. Fittingly, Nikobolas Planeswalker is from Conflux, one of the sets in Alara block. This was not the first time Nikobolas ever appeared, but it was the first time he got a Planeswalker card. He has a converted mana cost of 8 and is not very easy to cast, but he definitely pays you back for your effort. This version of Bolas can destroy non-creature permanents while gaining a ton of loyalty, or pay a little bit of loyalty to straight up steal creatures. Mind control effects are among the most powerful things you can do in this entire game. In most of his appearances, Nikobolas makes players discard cards, and that's what his ultimate does. In addition to doing 7 damage to them, it makes them lose their hand and sacrifice 7 permanents. That mana cost has held Nikobolas back a bit, and he only managed a single point in Standard back in 2009, where he was one of the win conditions in 5-color control. If you can ever manage to resolve the Conflux Bolas, you're probably going to win the game, but doing it is a challenge. At number 9, it's Draxs Spectre. Spectres, kind of like Bolas, have a long history of making people discard cards, and this one does it too, making the opponent discard a card every time it hits them. In addition to that, it gives you a pretty efficient evasive body as a 3-mana 3/2 flyer. It also comes with the Unearth mechanic, which lets it come back from the graveyard with haste for a single swing, which in this case usually means your opponent will be losing a card from their hand too. So Draxs Spectre has a single point from Standard, where it appeared as a 4-of in a Grixis control deck that top 8'd at Grand Prix Manila in 2010. At number 8, it is Kess, Dissident Mage. Kess was originally printed in Commander 2017, a supplemental set, and for that reason, for a while, she was only ever legal in Legacy and Vintage. She received a reprint though in Modern Horizons, which also gave her legality in Modern. Kess has a super powerful ability that allows you to cast an instant or sorcery from your graveyard every turn, effectively giving it flashback equal to its mana cost since the card gets exiled. It doesn't hurt that Kess can represent a bit of a threat in the air either. Kess has a couple of points from Legacy Grixis decks, both of them coming in 2018. However, she has started seeing some play in Modern since gaining legality there, and while she doesn't currently have any points, I feel fairly confident saying that if I revisit this list in a couple of years, she'll probably have gained some more points. At number 7, it is Crosis' Charm. Nikobolas isn't the only Grixis dragon out there. There's also Crosis, who debuted in Invasion block. We will actually see Crosis further up on this list. That set had a cycle of 3-colored dragons, and each of them also had a charm. Like all charms, Crosis' Charm is a modal card that gives you 3 different choices. Most modal cards aren't especially efficient at what they do, but the flexibility they grant you makes up for that. This charm can destroy a non-black creature, bounce a permanent, or destroy an artifact. The flexibility means that it can always do something, and generally, it will always be something at least somewhat impactful. It also means that you can have Artifact Hate in your main deck without paying a high price for it. Grixis' Charm was featured in Grixis Control decks in 2001 and managed the top 8 at Worlds that year. At number 6, it is Nikobolas, Dragon God. It's been a while since we've talked about a Bolas. This is his most recent version, and it is one of the more unique planeswalkers we've seen. The most unique things about him are probably his static ability and his ultimate. His static ability lets you copy other planeswalkers' loyalty abilities, and his ultimate is an alternate win condition that can end the game if your opponent doesn't control a legendary creature or planeswalker. In addition to that, he can also destroy creatures or planeswalkers and draw you cards, while also making the opponent either exile cards from their hand or exile a permanent in play. He has gained points in Grixis and 4-color control decks. He's also seen some play in Fires of Invention decks, but decks featuring him haven't managed the top 8 just yet. He still has some time in Standard, and it would not be surprising for him to gain some more points in the meantime. At number 5, it is Grixis, the Purger. Grixis gives you an efficient flyer who can also allow you to go after your opponent's hand, so Bolas isn't the only Grixis dragon interested in making people discard cards. Grixis gained all of his points in Extended, where he was played as a singleton copy in some Reanimator decks. He was especially nice to get against opponents who plan on holding on to their hand, because if you could get Grixis in play on turn 2, then make them discard most of their hand on turn 3, most decks can't come back from that. It's pretty much game over from there. At number 4, it is Rise and Fall, a Grixis split card. Split cards are kind of like charms, which tend not to be the most efficient thing ever, but make up for it with flexibility. If either half of this were a card on its own, there would be a significant chunk of the time where the card would not be useful, but by putting them together, you make that much less likely. The Rise half is great in situations where your opponent has a creature you want to bounce, and you have a creature you want to get back from your graveyard. You can also use it to bounce your own creature potentially, and when you can do all of that, it's giving you some serious value, effectively a 2-mana bounce spell that draws you a card, and the Fall half can be useful when you are concerned about your opponent's hand. Rise and Fall managed the top 8 in Ravnica Block Constructed in a Rakdos aggro deck, and also has a single top 8 from a modern Grixis control deck from back in 2015. At number 3, it is Nikobolas, the Ravager. This side of the double-faced Nikobolas from Core Set 2019 depicts Bolas before he was a Planeswalker. Instead, he's a regular old Elder Dragon. Just this side of the card is pretty nice, since he gives you a serious flying threat who also makes the opponent discard a card. That means you're usually going to get a 2-for-1 out of him no matter what. Transforming him costs a lot of mana, but once he becomes Nikobolas the Arisen, he's pretty incredible. He can draw you a bunch of cards, do 10 damage to a creature or planeswalker, or reanimate something, and he has an ultimate that will win you the game in 2 turns in most cases. Like a lot of cards on this list, Nikobolas the Ravager was played in Grixis control decks, but he was also featured in Grixis mid-range decks while he was in Standard. At number 2, it is Nikobolas, God Farrow, the 4th and final Bolas to make the list. Another Bolas with hefty mana requirements. Bolas in his God Farrow form comes with a massive 7 loyalty and 2 abilities that raise his loyalty while doing super powerful things. The +2 lets you steal an opponent's card from their deck and cast it for free, and the +1 makes the opponent exile 2 cards from their hand. He can also kill creatures or planeswalkers by doing 7 damage to them, and he has an ultimate that exiles every non-land permanent your opponent controls. While in Standard, this Bolas was largely a sideboard card for energy decks. And at number 1, it's Cruel Ultimatum. Alright, so I said we had seen our last Bolas, and I didn't lie, but Cruel Ultimatum is still a Bolas card. It depicts him looming over and really frightening a massive, scary-looking demon, really showing you just how frightening Bolas himself is. And because this is a Bolas card, that means 5 of the top 10 cards on this list are all about Bolas. This is basically MTG top 10 Bolas, right? Anyway, Cruel Ultimatum is one of the sweetest cards there is, and it is great because it can allow you to pull back ahead even if you're pretty far behind as a control deck. Making your opponent discard 3 cards, lose a creature, and lose life, while you simultaneously gain 5 life, draw 3 cards, and get a creature back from your graveyard is insane. And if the person who casts it untaps after casting this, they will pretty much be unstoppable. As you might expect, it was played in control decks in Standard. This included 4 and 5 color control decks, some of which were dubbed Cruel Control because the deck's game plan was all about the Ultimatum. These decks were featured in both Standard and Extended. Well, that does it for this MTG Top 10. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it and share it so that others can enjoy it too. If you want to make sure you catch future MTG Top 10s, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to catch up on the over 250 MTG Top 10s I've already done, you should see the playlist on your screen now. Thanks for watching.